Hi,
Ready.
everyone. This is Karen Prosser. I'm Executive Director of Chagrin Arts. And well, I'm so excited to be back doing this and connecting with two people who are integral to the production of Macbeth that we're going to be doing at Solon Community Park very, very soon. This is a great opportunity to kind of learn a little bit, behind the scenes of what's been going on and what has been going on historically with this play and play on Shakespeare. And I am so pleased to introduce to all of you Louis Douthit, who's the creative director of Play on Shakespeare, Migdalia Cruz, who is the translator of William Shakespeare's words for this production, and my dear friend Terry Moyer from TV3, who's going to be the moderator, who's got a bunch of really fun questions. And I'm sure it's never, I'm knowing these two women, as I do, or three, I should say, that it's not going to follow the script at all. So be prepared for a lot of ad-libbing and a lot of fun, but it's going to be all about Chagrin Arts and Shakespeare and the production that's coming up. So I'm going to turn it over to my friend Terry. Take it away.
Thanks. Migdalia, I wanted to start with you because you're the person who got tasked with having to rewrite Macbeth, certainly one of Shakespeare's most iconic plays. How much of a challenge did that pose for you?
I think it was like being presented with a really kind of delicious dare to enter a world that people are afraid to enter, except with a lot of reverence. It was about daring to go in and try to insert my voice in a voice that so many people already knew, and find my way through it without destroying what was already there, but also trying to bring my own aesthetics and my own sense of story and storytelling into the work. So it was difficult, but it wasn't laborious, I would say. I wasn't like, oh my God, this is awful. I think I'm going to die today because I have to translate Shakespeare. It was more kind of like, oh, this is a challenge. I might fail. And, but I'm learning so much about my own work by working with this other writer. And I took it as like I used to want to be a librarian. I was like, this is my research for myself and my work. I'm going to figure out his process and then insert my process and see how somehow both processes would come forward and make it a more modern play, a more connectable play, and a play that clearly could be understood and clearly spoken by a modern audience and a modern group of actors, and performed in a modern dramatic way, as opposed to every actor being their own dramaturg and looking up every other word before they perform Shakespeare. Now they could just act because they should understand every single word from the minute they get the text, the way they do in a modern text. So I think that's how I approached it.
Louis, you know what? This seems like the perfect time to ask you, can you talk a little bit about Play on Shakespeare and how it came to be and some of the successes that you've had?
Yeah, thanks, Terry. I love that answer, Migdalia, about being the librarian. That's so beautiful and sort of great. And our interest in having this be something that people could pick up and read right away without seeing that sort of strip of terror, the footnotes at the bottom of the page. So Terry, that really is the goal, which is can Migdalia and the other 33 writers that we have commissioned to translate these plays walk with Shakespeare? And Migdalia described it perfectly in terms of wanting to be, what was Shakespeare doing? What is my rhythm and the way I enter and work on a piece? And what happens when we meld them together? It becomes its own piece, but it still has the rhythm of Shakespeare, and it definitely has Migdalia's rhythm in it, and which is a more contemporary one and one that we are much more familiar with in our bodies and in the way we receive language and the way we speak language. And so it's become this really interesting kind of linguistic exercise and kind of walk. We were talking a little bit before this interview officially began, Terry, and you were saying how you've heard one of these before. And at first it seems a little odd, but then you get into it and you go, oh, I'm really kind of understanding this and it's kind of fun. Well, I think 400 years ago, these were kind of fun. And I think people did not need to read the footnotes. And I think that they got right into the play right away. And he's a hell of a playwright. in terms of keeping us interested by the introduction of story and theme, sort of the action that's happening. I mean, he's always kind of keeping you very interested. And just as an exercise, as Migdalia was kind of hinting at, it's an interesting one to take on. And if I taught playwriting, I think it'd be one of the first exercises I would ask a playwright to do, because I think you'd learn an awful lot about how to tell a story in 3 dimensions theatrically. How this all began was from an Oregon Shakespeare Festival patron and donor whose name is David Hitz. He approached the artistic director of the Oregon Shakespeare Festival about 12 years ago, where I was working, and he said I would pay to translate one Shakespeare play into contemporary modern English. And from there, we all said, well, we have no idea what you're talking about, but it was an intriguing challenge. And so we took him up on it, and suddenly we did this experiment, and it was very successful. And then we wanted to do all 39 of them. And that's when I roped Migdalia into not 1, but 2 of these. And I'm telling her she's got to do a comedy the next time, because she's taken on 2 big tragedies. But that's kind of what happened. It was, sort of evolved bit by bit. It was an experiment. Migdalia's Macbeth has performed, I don't know, half a dozen times now, maybe. Hey, Migdalia?
Yeah,
Something like that. It's been the most produced of all of them, which is awesome. And it's the one that just came out in publication form, and it was the first of our podcast. So we have definitely taken great advantage of Migdalia's mastery over this particular material. I'm thrilled that Chagrin Arts is going to do this summer and so on.
Well, and I have a question for you. I feel like there are people who hear Shakespeare and they automatically go, no, 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 no. Do you think this will attract or engage maybe a new theater audience who put off by the these, the thous, the those, and sort of the way that sort of iconic Shakespeare, sort of thumbprint that he puts on everything? Do you think this will attract new audiences? Is that part of what the mission is to get people more interested in these wonderful, wonderful works?
I mean, sure. And also those of us who know these plays really well, I dare say that when you go to hear and see Migdalia's Macbeth in Solon Park in a couple of weeks, or this coming week, I guess, Macbeth really well, I bet you're going to hear some things that you didn't really know. And this sort of really kind of fun to hear it afresh, as it were, because there's a lot less in the way of the ear to the brain kind of thing in the way it's been reframed. Migdalia did. It's not a rewrite exactly. I mean, Migdalia, I'd love for you to jump in here too, because the story is exactly the same. It's the same story. She didn't mess with the story. The characters are still the same. The motivations of the characters are the same. It's just that they pop in a clearer way than I think might have happened 400 years ago. And the these and the thous were contemporary language 400 years ago. They are not today. Although I can't remember now, Migdalia, if you've kept some of that language in the Macbeth, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because she was experimenting with this blend. We have 400 years of language we get to play with now, right? And these plays can hold all of this, and you can take advantage of older language for older characters, maybe. I mean, I'm not saying that's what Migdalia did, but a lot of the playwrights kind of played around with, like, how do you match the language to the character and the action, which is all Shakespeare's doing, which is what playwrights do, right? So yes, new audiences, but also those of us who think we know these plays. I hope that there's great joy in hearing them as if for the first time, and actually hearing a couple of more in-depth motivations of these characters. And that's some of the big takeaways that we have experienced. Remember, Migdalia, when we did that talk back in Boston for the production of the Actor Shakespeare project, and both of us were like, okay, we're on the stage, but I was like, get ready for it to come, because there were a lot of, I know Shakespeare and I teach Shakespeare. And I thought, okay, here it comes. And they all, you remember this? They said, well, I was skeptical. And I thought, okay, but I learned something about the play and I was really pleased. I mean, that was the second half of the sentence. Score, right? That's the experience we're hoping to have.
Well,
Mhm.
I tell you, they said I mean, Louis said you have already translated two of them. Was your experience with those two, and Louis, certainly over the ones that you have seen that, different noted playwrights have done this for, are there some works of Shakespeare that are more difficult to translate than others, do you think?
You want
Um,
to talk about your experience, Migdalia, with the two?
I think because at first I was offered wasn't Coriolanus, Cymbeline, and when I read Cymbeline, I thought, oh, way too much poetry, and way too much of the male gaze in a way that I didn't feel comfortable perpetuating or making easier to listen to.
Right.
I thought,
Right.
you're not going to be able to change this unless you really change it. And that was my thought of it, and it was awfully long. So I thought, all right, well, the play that I really like is Macbeth. So I'm going to ask Louis if she'll let me do Macbeth. And I thought, she'll never let me do Macbeth. Somebody, I'm sure, has chosen Macbeth. And she's this fabulous play. And it was still available of all the translate. I was like, oh, that's mine. And I knew immediately that I wanted to do that because Macbeth has all of the themes that I have in my own plays. It has great love. It has betrayal. It has passion. It has what happens when people who are of a lower status try to gain status in a society and are put down and treated as the outliers. And that in turn creates rage. These are all things that are in all of my plays. I was like, oh yeah, Macbeth's my man. And Lady Macbeth, I thought in particular, I related to her. And I also thought, why do they always make her such a monster and this like she's the entire motor of all of the evil of the play. And I thought that's the wrong way to do this. This is a play that's about love, that is motivated by a couple's equal need to please each other in this rise from the outside to the inside. And I was like, all right, well, how do I do that? How do I make that clear? So I just felt so connected to Macbeth that there was no other choice for me really at the beginning. And then when Richard III came available, I was like, oh yeah, well, Richard III has lines that are actually in Macbeth. So Richard III, I think, was maybe his 6th play, Macbeth his 28th play. So by the time he got to Macbeth, he was very advanced in poetry. Richard III has great plotting. It has all that fabulous English history that in his own time everyone would know, and that makes it difficult then to translate to modern audiences. But the idea that, I mean, those two characters, right, Macbeth and Richard III, are both outliers. And I thought, these are my men. And that's where I felt my people, not just that they were men, but that they were the kind of figures and the kind of journeys that I like to take in my playwriting. And the thing about Macbeth also, the things that I added, I'm like, I think Louis hinted at my reframing it. I really wanted to frame it with the witches being the sort of the ones controlling the world, not just predicting it or spurring it on. They were actually making things happen. And I thought, what happens if we're really in a magical world? What if we are really in a world where these 3 women or unearthly creatures are actually on Earth, and that they are whatever we're afraid of now? So I thought a lot about what happens if they're trans women, what happens if they're drag queens, what happens if they're cisgendered females that are also sometimes of people are afraid of, men are in particular are afraid of in our society. How do we make those new kind of women be the what would you call it, become the new atlas of the world that I'm trying to create? Like they're holding this world up and they're saying, see, this is why this happened, and this is how we can make things better, and this is who should really run Scotland. And we know, and it should be Fleance. So I really wanted to frame them that way, and I felt like I could add stuff for them because Shakespeare borrowed stuff from other writers for his songs for them, and I thought, oh well, he's stealing from other writers like Thomas Middleton.
I'll borrow too.
Well, I didn't have to borrow. I said, I'll just steal from, he can steal from Cruz. So I put my songs in, and I wrote songs that were for the witches, and I gave them intros to scenes that you could see that they were creating the scenes as opposed to just commenting on them. So for me, that was delightful because then I really was able to give it a very, I don't know if I'd say feminist, but certainly a Migdaliaist gaze on this world that was, that included a new kind of society, or the society of the future, and a society that I wanted to see, right? Where women of color who are treated like they're strange creatures, and yet they're sexually exciting, and yet they're dangerous, that somehow those women would be the ones who have the power to change the world if they are listened to, and they are able to function in this world.
It absolutely sounds fabulous. It really does. Louis, I have a question for you though. So you were saying that Migdalia is one of 33, 34, right? How did you find these playwrights? How did you identify them and say, okay, are these people you've met through your career? Are these people over a lifetime you've admired their works?
Yes.
Yes and yes.
Yeah, I as I mentioned, I was at the Oregon Shakespeare Festival and was there for 25 years in the literary department. So, and actually, with high irony, was not in charge of Shakespeare at all. Some people would say I still am not in charge of Shakespeare, but I was the new play girl, and so I read thousands of new plays. I mean, not that OSF did a lot, but we were increasingly doing more. And I had read Migdalia's work early in my career and been a big fan. And we connected for the first time, Migdalia. I remember meeting you in Chicago at that conference, the name of which is escaping me at the moment.
Carnival.
Thank you, Carnival. Yeah. And I shyly went up to her because she is Migdalia Cruz. And I introduced myself. I mean, this was after, I don't know, 20 years or something of knowing her work. And then it was around the same time that this project had landed in my lap because I was the literary director at the time. So it's the kind of project that gets dropped in your lap and you think, well, now what do I do about this? And so I started to invite people I knew, and Migdalia was one of the first people I knew. As a poet, this was very important to me that I find people with poetic writing voices, and Migdalia was on the top of that list. So I think you were very early on in that. And then it became, when I decided to do 39 of them, and I thought, well, I can't just hire all my friends, even though, as you kind of want to. But I thought, listen, you got to grow too here, kiddo. So I would say easily a third of the writers I did not know at all. And a couple of them, I didn't even know their works. I reached out to a lot of friends, literary managers, and other theater artists, and said, who's the voice? Who do you, who are you reading these days? And I wanted a range of early career, mid-career, late career writers as well. And I wanted a range of experiences. And it was very important to me that the cohort was 51% women and 51% writers of color. That was a contemporary gesture for me, and politically I had to have that just to expand who gets invited to this conversation, to say, everybody should have access. The interesting thing about Shakespeare is these works have been translated around the world, as you probably know, and when they are translated into other languages, they're not translated into the 16th century version of that language. They're translated into the contemporary version of that language. And Migdalia, you may be able to speak of this too, because you are bilingual, to say that when it's in contemporary Spanish or contemporary French or contemporary Russian, people who are speakers of those languages say to me, oh yeah, I have access to Shakespeare a lot faster than I do in English, because it's very contemporary to me. It becomes, because of this blend that I was asking Migdalia and the other writers to create their own kind of, you know, little bit of Merlot and a little bit of whatever, you know, this contemporary blend that I'm asking them to create. It does feel very contemporary, and a little, like I said before, a little easier to begin, you know, to get involved in the story. A lot of times it takes 20 minutes before your ear kind of catches up. It's like you're working, it's an intellectual thing. Plays are not an intellectual thing. Plays are based on emotion and grabbing us and keeping us engaged with sort of like, and really caring about sort of what happens with these characters. Even if we're rooting against them, we're still kind of caring for them, and like what, you know, the decisions that they make, the consequences that happens to them, and the way we're kind of like trying to like stay with that story. That's what plays are, and that's how they work until the end, you know, until whatever has been solved in Flayance is you know, the next going to be the next leader of Scotland. That's how plays work. But you know, if you have this kind of intellectual, for me, kind of a barrier for the first 20 minutes or so, and it does drop in. But meanwhile, I've missed so many things that Migdalia and Shakespeare would have set up. Like I can't imagine, Migdalia, if I'd said to you as literary manager, I would have said, listen, don't worry, I don't know what's happening in your play for the first 20 minutes, but I'll give you the time. I'll give you the time. It's like audiences aren't going to do that, right? They're just not, and they didn't 400 years ago. So it's an interesting way to translate. When we say translating, we're talking about translating the experience from 400 years ago, which I think was very immediate. It was in a language people spoke, in a syntax people were used to hearing, and immediate in terms of actors and audience. And I said, Migdalia, do that great Migdalia thing and make this as immediate with your syntax and in your musicality and in your poetic voice, that is the translation of the experience. And tell that story and see what happens when we put it through the Migdalia, you know, lens. That's not the right metaphor, but hopefully you know what I mean. And it's this awesome experience of this story, and you will hear it as if for the first time, and perhaps experience it as if for the first time. And that's amazing to think about.
And you guys, I mean, obviously you've both seen Migdalia. You've seen more than one production of your work, correct?
Yes.
Do you find that different actors and different casts bring different nuances to your words?
Yes.
And is it I mean, and Louis, the same thing for you. Have you guys actually been in between different productions, been surprised at any point where you go like, wow, that is being played really interesting? Because are there different, I'm assuming there's different directors directing all these, correct?
Right. It's always been a different director.
Right.
I think the actors, I mean, but that's true of any production, I think, that has
Yeah.
a new cast. You go in and
Yeah.
our actors always surprise me. Like, they were like, really? Is that what I wrote? Or sometimes it's better. Usually, you know, hopefully it's better. It's not always better. Sometimes you're like, what are they doing? Just say the words. I once had a production where every monologue was spoken really slowly. And it was like, oh my God, talk, talk, I'm gonna die in my seat. And the other side of that is that people know I'm Puerto Rican, so they want all the language to be really fast, so you never really understand what anybody's saying because they think Puerto Ricans talk really fast. And I'm like, slow that down. Because people have to listen, you know, audiences are human. They have human ears. So there's always these assumptions that happen with each production, like, should we sound Englishy in this particular case? Should we have accents? Should we have English accents? No, for goodness sake, no, have your own accent. The point of this for me was that, you know, that in particular American actors, but also English actors who all have different, come from different places in the UK, should revel in who they are, in their culture and in the language, so that it really feels contemporary, because it crosses borders and it becomes more global, which is what we are as a people now, right? Because people come from everywhere. We have that privilege of being able to travel. So people are meeting people from all over the world. So when you put them all in one play, they're not all going to sound uniform anyway. So I thought, no, use your own accent, make the language your own, and that's what makes it exciting. Those are the only times when like I would get scared and in a rehearsal when the people would start to sound Englishy. I'm like, oh, don't do that. First of all, very few American actors can do a really good English accent. I hate to say, but even the ones that do perfect ones, it's like, but that's not you. And that sort of for me spoiled the exercise. The greater idea of the exercise of it becoming contemporary, becoming more me, becoming something that could be played
Right.
in Ohio, in the Bronx, in San Francisco, and also in London. It can play in all,
Yeah.
you know?
Yep. I think it's in Sunderland, England right now, maybe. I'm not even
Oh
sure.
yeah,
Was
I
it
never
this,
heard
was it
any
this
more from
weekend?
them.
Yeah, yeah.
It's the same
Yes.
weekend that this one
We
is
think
opening.
it's,
So.
yeah, we think it's, yeah, sometime. But to your question, it's a great question, Terry. I mean, for me, I'm going to answer it the opposite, which is to say, if anybody jumps into like that received pronunciation or the way they think Shakespeare is supposed to sound, that's when this exercise deflates. And it's hard to get out of the rhythm of that. I mean, I am not an actor, but I know enough about acting training to know that that there's a way to that Shakespeare is taught in terms of how to perform it, and I want to bust people of that habit, to be honest. It does not sound natural to me, as Migdalia is saying, and I think, and again, I'm not an actor, so I've not been in these, I've not spoken them through my mouth, but I think that there is a relaxation because the syntax is a little more the way we speak, and that often I feel more relaxed because the actor is more relaxed. I mean, it's curious, right? Somebody's trying to do tennis mom, like oh, please make that point, kind of thing. But I see the actors are more relaxed, and then I find I'm more deeply involved in character. And I think this is true of the acting as well. But we don't have enough examples really to do a study of this point I'm making. But out of the 6, I think I've seen. Well, I think I've seen 5 now, maybe with the. I'm going to come see it in Chagrin. So. I'm really looking forward to having this experience with you all in a couple weeks.
And do you guys feel like, do the audiences, so, you were talking about San Francisco, New York, Cleveland, England, do audiences react differently? I mean, your words are your words, Migdalia, but do you find that audiences, in the way that you were talking about, they put it into their own, I mean, the underlying themes have remained, obviously, but in presenting them in a way that is completely relevant to me. I hear you and you're talking with an Ohio Midwest accent. Do you find that audiences receive it differently when it's in different places? Or does that underlying theme of it sort of supersede just, hey, to your point, Louis, that, I think you're right. I think people are more comfortable when you're talking to me exactly like you would talk to me if we were sitting across from one another, and you're embracing words that I hear every day in my everyday life, as opposed to something that was written 400 years ago. But I just wonder if theater audiences are different in different places. Do they, and obviously this one, Migdalia, you can't talk about, but in a comedy, does everybody laugh in the same place? Because I've seen comedies done in New York and I've seen them done in Cleveland, and sometimes the audiences laugh in different places, and I'm always like, that was really funny in New York. I guess it's not that funny here.
Yeah. No, comedy is a whole other conversation, Terry. Very complicated. It's a great question about audiences and Shakespeare in particular. And what I've been thinking about is to say that my hunch is that people have an expectation about Shakespeare more than they have a sense of sort of regional, I don't know, access. I don't know how to put, and that is the fun part, again, for audience that I have experienced with audiences kind of actually enjoying it, especially if they didn't think they were going to, for all kinds of reasons. One is it's not ye old Shakespeare language, although Migdalia has definitely read the publication. I mean, it is deftly done the way Migdalia weaves and blends. It is still high poetry. It is not, dumbed down language. It's not LOLO, yo dude. It's still the thoughts are still long, You know, it's just sometimes the order of the events along the way and along thought are she has pulled out or twisted a little bit so that it catches our ears just differently. That's all. The syntax is just different sometimes. But I think it has more, it might be more about the people who come to see a Shakespeare play have certain expectations, and all of the, except maybe, well, even the Chagrin Arts one. I mean, McDowell, it seems to me all of the other productions were with Shakespeare companies, so they're a specialized audience too. Do you know what I mean? Not saying it's not regional one way or the other, but there's another layer, I guess I'm saying, in terms of how it may be received.
Mhm.
And how did you guys get involved with Chagrin Arts?
That's all Karen's fault. You know her.
All right, Karen, roll back in here. Let's talk about this. How did Karen find you? How did you find them? First of all, can I tell you, this sounds so amazing and so interesting. And boy, I hope audiences of all ages and everything, I hope they all show up, because I just think this is going to be a really unique experience, and it's really cool.
Yeah,
I'm
thank you.
really
Well,
interested to hear your work, Magdalia. I really am. I'm excited.
yeah,
to
yeah.
know.
Well,
Thank you.
read it in the podcast too. It's in a podcast form, and that's also been really fun and
That was
brilliant.
great. That was so fun to do.
Brilliant sound design by David Molina too. I mean, completely different experience. Are there going to be food carts? That's all that matters, right? So all I'm saying is, Terry, what's not to love? You got food carts and free Shakespeare. Come on now.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
So how did you find them?
I got this job and her brother was on the board and they were talking about Shakespeare. And so when this happened, it was kind of like, well, we're already talking to Louis and we got to do this. And so then we brought Louis in for this wonderful Chautauqua talk, which was great in 2019. And then we said, why don't we do one of these plays from Play On? And we did. And then we had this little production Zoom with Tyler and Delaney, the directors who've been doing this for us for 3 years, and they're brilliant and fun and great to work with, so talented. And someone who is on this screen somewhere said, you know, I've always wanted to do like a drive-in movie theater. And then we entered COVID. Look at her. And it was like, well, maybe we could, I don't know. And so what did we do, Louis?
Yeah, you pivoted beautifully.
Yeah,
It created a film, and then we showed the film in the park. And the night that Taylor Bailey, my associate, the producer at Play On, was with me too, that was the night that the Innocence Project people were there. It was a great tribute to them, and we got to meet them and the wonderful fine work that they are doing as well. Yeah, it just was one of those moments. I'm from Ohio. Any excuse to come back home.
Oh,
I was taking notes, you know,
Yeah,
but this was
that's-
not your average drive-in theater. You know, this
No,
was like
not
a
either.
17-foot LED screen by
Wow.
Huey.
yeah, it was fantastic. It was
It was.
fantastic.
But everything fell into place. And
Yeah.
we did it, and we did it all on Zoom, and everybody stayed socially distant, couldn't get the actors all in the same place.
No, it was
Yeah.
masterfully done. Yeah, and Tyler and Delaney, they are the Baldwin Wallace program, right?
Yes.
oh, that's a great
That's
program.
that's a great program.
It's a
My
great
goodness,
program.
really, really great program. So that's fun. So, but this year, the exciting part is that we get to do this live.
Oh my
And
gosh.
so, I mean, we're all pretty excited about that. And
I will tell you, I
it's
mean,
gonna be
last
great.
year when we got to the end of the whole taping and technology and all that stuff, I mean, Tyler said to me, oh, I think it was opening night when we were like making sure all the technology worked and the screen and the guy in the booth. It was like a 747 in this trailer. And he said, you know, I miss the good old days, you know, to be able to direct live with like real actors. And you know, it was the good old days. And here are these young, you know, very wonderful professional theater people going, the good old days.
Yeah, the good old days last year.
Yeah, last year. So, but they're
Yeah,
doing it now.
Yeah, I
Karen,
know,
talk
but you all
about-
vivid,
talk
you
about-
go.
because you're dedicating this performance to the Ohio Innocence Project, right?
Yes.
Talk about that and sort of what you see as the synergy between these two events.
It was interesting last year because if we all remember last year, which is kind of the year that disappeared, but it really didn't. that this was a very tumultuous time in our history of the country, and the cast, as they got back together, was like, we really need to make this about something important, like really important. And they were thinking about different kinds of charities that we could, raise funds for, to do some good out of the arts. And so we Chagrin Arts already had a relationship with the Ohio Innocence Project, and we believe wholeheartedly in being able to bring awareness in the Cleveland area, because they're located out of the Cincinnati Law School, University of Cincinnati Law School, but to bring awareness to the criminal justice system and the faults of that, but the wrongful convictions of these people who are like you and me, and it could happen to anybody. And these people have spent decades behind bars. And I will tell you a very quick story. Last year, Louis, I don't know if I ever told you this, that we work closely with Federated Church and the Social Justice Advocacy Ministry program of the church.
Mhm.
And so one of the women showed up on that Sunday night, and I had been on a lot of Zoom meetings with them, telling them about this project and about what the work of Chagrin Arts, that we're doing with OIP. And she showed up and with her husband, and she saw me before the show started. And she goes, "Oh, this is really great. I see that you're dedicating this to the Ohio Innocence Project." And she said, "Is Pat Hainish here?" Pat is our board president. And I said, "Yeah, I'll get her. I mean, I'll get you guys together during intermission." So intermission comes, I get them together, I go running off doing whatever I do. And I find out later she wanted to know if Ricky Jackson, who is one of the clients of the Ohio Innocence Project, if he was there with his family, because it was family night. We were putting real recognition
Yeah.
on those people. And of course, Pat said, "Yes, Ricky said, I'll go get him." Because she said, I really want to meet him. And here it is, Solon Community Park. This is September 6th, 2020. And Ricky walks up. They kind of know each other. They start talking, and then they started crying and hugging each other.
Oh,
It was her uncle who was murdered,
Oh, wow.
that he spent almost 40 years in prison being accused. Yeah. They sucked the air
Wow.
out of that room. Yeah. But things like
wow.
that, and this program that I've been involved with since I've been here at Chagrin Arts, this kind of stuff happens all the time for me. I mean,
Yeah.
I'm not kidding you. It's just these uncanny dot connections. And it just makes me believe that everything that we're doing here is the right time and the right place. And, I mean, these people are I consider my friends, and, they were wronged. And if there's anything that we can do, and because they're artists and they're painters and they're musicians, and how do we give them that opportunity to, express those talents? So I feel very, very blessed that I get to do the work I'm doing. And so everybody check out the Ohio Innocence Project and come and support us at Shakespeare. So
Yes.
Now we need to give the dates.
yes, it would be the 7th and 8th of August, and the 14th and 15th of August. That would be 2021. And it's at 5 curtain, not that there's a curtain, but the curtain of the trees and the beauty of the park is at 5:30. And the food trucks, just so you can mark your calendars, are coming at 5, or they'll probably be there beforehand. And I have no idea. I know that last year the city of Solon provided food trucks, and they were like the real she food trucks,
They were great. Yeah. It was good food.
I know,
Yeah.
but or you can, if you choose to, bring your own picnic dinner. There are no circles drawn in the park this year,
Wow.
Oh,
because
that's cool.
last year there were 6
Yes.
circles,
People
and
could
people had to
sit.
be
Yeah,
masked. And
yeah.
so you're going to enjoy
Okay.
this concert just like you remember this this play, like you remember going to Shakespeare in the Park, for all those people who love doing that in the summer. And I will tell you, this production is, Tyler and Delaney decided they would do the tragedy, the drama this year, because we did As You Like It, and then last year was Twelfth Night. So this is a little bloodier. So but we have this year we've raised the scale, and we've got a real stage with, so that people won't have any sight problems. And I'm looking forward to it. So I can't thank you two enough on the screen, and for bringing this once again to the area of the Northeast Ohio area and Cleveland area, because people just can't be missing this.
And we
this is an
really,
event.
really want to encourage anybody who's listening right now, not just do you show up, make sure you tell friends, neighbors, colleagues, coworkers, because this is obviously an extraordinary piece of work written by an extraordinary woman, produced by a fantastic group, and the guests of my friend Karen Prasser, who is one of the most dedicated arts educators and patrons that I've ever met in my life. So to me, this is a can't miss event.
Hey, thank you guys. And Louis, we'll see. Are you coming on the last weekend?
Yes, I'll
Okay.
be there on the 14th.
Excellent. Migdalia, Louis, thank you
Thank
so
you
much.
so much for your
My
time.
dear friend Terry,
Welcome.
this has been really, really fun. And I
Yeah.
hope everybody comes to see us soon.
I really enjoyed meeting you guys.
Thank
guys.
you.
Same here.
Thank you. Take
Great.
care.
Thank you, Terry. Bye-bye.
Bye.